wouldn't it be cool if every team, whether it was identified by the captain or by the coach, ideally the captain, of like, this is their role on the team. You don't wear it on your jersey. You don't have an A or a C, but like you hold a weekly meeting just asking the team, like what everyone's good. Everyone just, and that might be a tough conversation to have in a dressing room, as we know. Maybe someone might not put their hand up and say, you know what, guys, I'm going through this. Maybe they will though. Like that would be, just to have that kind of a platform would be so special.
Welcome to Tad Voices. I'm Nick.
And I'm Lawson. And we're friends and former teammates who are here to talk about mental health.
We are by no means experts in this field, nor is this a substitute for professional help, but we can promise open and vulnerable conversations that highlight the strength of some amazing people who have decided to share their story with us.
Talk, share, help. And thanks for listening.
Our next guest was born and raised in Toronto, Ontario, before crossing the border to attend Oswego State University in upstate New York. While in school, he played hockey and founded For the Kids, which is an organization built to raise funds and awareness for child abuse victims within Oswego County. Since then, he has moved back to Toronto while becoming a mental health advocate. We are so excited to hear more about yourself, your mental health journey, and everything else you got to offer. Welcome to the podcast, Eli Swallow.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. This is a very cool, surreal experience to finally get behind the camera with you guys and talk about something that should be as casual as this conversation. So it's truly a pleasure.
Eli, this is kind of interesting. For those of you who are listening right now, we're actually, we're on Zoom, but we're probably a couple blocks away or something like that.
I think so. It's about a par 4 away.
Yeah.
From where we are right now. A par 5 for Shaw, but a par 5 for most. And but we're really close. So knowing that now, we'll get together for a coffee post podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. But like Nick said, we're super excited to have you on here, and I think a good place to start is just over the last few months, how have you been keeping busy kind of during this whole pandemic?
It couldn't be more fitting. But about 3 months ago, I think so. Yeah, about 3 months ago now. Both sides of the coin made the decision to step away from my current position, at a company that I have nothing but the utmost respect for and still have very good ties with. But, what a platform to talk about it. I had to take a step away and kind of worry about me and worry about what was going on with myself. And, for the last 3 months, I've been doing that. I've been unemployed or the fun word of funemployed, if you will, losing a couple balls on the golf course here and there. But more than anything, just getting myself back to neutral and finding out, how to do that and what my process is, something very specific to me. And I think that's something that's, essential in understanding mental health, is that, there's not a blanket that you can cover everyone's process to get through something. So, with mine, I needed to take a step away from work and from the job, and it's been incredible. Truly, it's what a change for me mentally, and it was much needed. So important to identify when you do come out of a struggle, is to know when you are turning that corner, and it's right now. So it's been an interesting 3 months, very self-reflective, but at the same time, it's been great too.
Well, great for you. I mean, I think humanizing feelings and being able to create an atmosphere where an individual can, self-awarely assess where they are. And so congratulations, because I think that's a huge step, and it had to have been a very difficult situation for yourself, but congratulations for doing that. And, I think the next, step for us here is we'd love for you to, as open as you want to be, I think this is the floor to explain sort of your mental health journey and sort of how you got from, where you were to where you are today.
And absolutely. And, with with that, congratulations. It goes, with the whole conversation of mental health. It's, when, if you can self-identify that you do go through something, in a picture perfect world, you act on it right away. You act on it during that process. I unfortunately have to now be self-reflective and realize that the changes need to be made when it was almost a little bit too little too late. I stepped away from work, yes, but my performance was definitely being affected, with, some relationships that I was, have had to take a step back because, quite frankly, that person that I was in that moment, there was no more going down. And so when I say this with a process to anyone listening, it's, if you can identify you're going through something, don't wait till you kind of have no other way but up, if that makes any sense. Because, it sounds cliche to say this, but, being at the bottom of the barrel and then working your way upwards is great. But if you can identify triggers or, things that are changing within yourself, or if your friends and family are making comments to you about, something going on, be more self-reflective. I think that's a big thing that people don't want to do. People that go through mental health often are in the most self-denial than anybody that's going through it. Like, how can I be going through this? I'm this, I'm that, I have everything. How can I be going through this when you really need to be your strongest advocate in this process? So, my whole process is definitely being the self-reflective thing, going back and identifying, why am I feeling this way? Is it because of certain things? Is it because of something happening in my day to day? Is it just, a time where I'm in a funk? Is it what's going on, versus just denying it and sweeping it under the rug and pretending like everything's okay? That's when problems really start to grow and become real issues, So, obviously with therapy, with having an incredible support system in my family and friends, my dog, let's not kid ourselves. That's a huge, huge thing. But, I know what gets me out of things. I know what's puts me in poor places. And it's making those decisions mindfully that will, hopefully, limit the encounters with those bad times, because you're never going to not have bad times. It's not like, so when people think that, you're going through mental health issues, it's one day it's white, the next day it's going to be black. You're always going to have certain things to deal with. It's just learning your tools and how to deal with them. And I think that's an enormous part of my process, is learning what those tools are. And, I have no problem talking about them, working out, getting back into shape, really, when you're so exhausted after a hard day of, of working and then going to the gym really hard, when you're so tired that you can't really sit there and let your mind wander, hey, it helps your process. Put your body through the paces, give yourself the best chance, for that kind of mental stimulation through your physical activity. That's a huge part of my process. When I was going through it about 3 months ago at its peak, I was at the worst shape I've ever been in, eating the worst things humanly possible, afraid to go to the gym, overly sensitive, completely defensive. Everybody and their mother was against me, when I just needed to take a step back and be like, hey, Eli, like, you know what you have to do, start doing them. And then, but taking that step is everything. But how hard it is to take that step is what makes, mental health the craziest battle ever. It's crazy. I don't even know how words to say it. Mental health is a wild beast that we can all learn how to not necessarily kill, but learn how to manage and control. I think that's the biggest difference that I believe people need to learn. You're never going to kill the beast, but you should learn how to live with it, maintain it, control it, and grow from it, because I'm not ashamed of what I go through. I think that's an important thing, that it's me going through the negative and the hard times. I'm a very sensitive, emotional, positive guy, which I feel is only you only feel both sides, you can't have one without the other. And, I really do have nothing but appreciation for who I am. And I think that once people stop fighting what they go through and learning how to live with it and control it, I think that's what's going to be a huge step for mental health advocacy in general.
Yeah, and I think you made a really interesting point there. It's something that I'm certainly glad you were able to obtain, but just kind of that state of, being comfortable with being self-reflective, right? And being able to kind of look at your past struggles and maybe identify those triggers, identify certain things that we were doing that were unhealthy kind of over the long term, but kind of in that process that you were being reflective and looking back in your past, was there a specific instance that you can identify? I don't know if it would be a certain age or a lot of the times it can be these certain life events that maybe aren't necessarily traumatizing, but there's uncertainty in them and you're not really sure what the future holds. Like, can you identify any times like that where you knew right away, you were like, you know what, I'm definitely not myself right now, I'm going through some challenges? Like, could have been maybe going back to college or high school or something like that?
The first time I ever, once I started really identifying what anxiety, depression really is, and that, I deal with this, for the longest time I was in denial. So then once you accept that, it's okay to go through this and learning how to do it, then you go back. When did I first experience this? Like, did I always have this? Did this come out of nowhere? And I talked to my parents about it, and they said, Eli, you've always been an anxious kind of guy when you were younger and stuff like that. But I remember very specifically in college is when it really started to become a thing, like something that I would wake up in the morning, go to bed at night, and it was there. And it's kind of weird to say that. Like, hopefully people can relate to that. And that's how I verbalize it is this itch, or this kind of like something was there, something was off. And it definitely started at school. And I think, that's another thing that I hope we will definitely talk about is, not just the NCAA. I don't want to throw a blanket on that, but college sports, competitive sports, the mental health battles and struggles that go into that, professionally, amateur level. But what I can experience is collegiately. I don't know if we can swear, but holy, whatever you want to put in there. It was, that's where it definitely became an identifiable thing, being like, okay, I need to go talk to somebody. All right. This isn't just you're a worrywart, you're in your own head. Like, this is real. And I think in that moment, it was so hard to accept because, like everybody, I think that when you've been given the world, I have 2 loving parents, I have a beautiful sister, I have an amazing brother-in-law, I have everything anyone could ever want. And then you sit there at days and you can't get out of bed. The blankets are 1,000 pounds in school. You're a college athlete, you're NCAA, you've got to the level that you've always wanted in junior, and you can't show up to practice. You can't physically get out of bed. And and unless you go through it, like, you can't really understand what that means. And, I have nothing but respect for my teammates and stuff like that. But I've never spoken to them about that. But like, I would wonder what they would think about, Cameron missed practice again. Oh, he's not feeling well, like, how often can a guy not feel well? So it's just like, then I got in my own head that people were, what did they think about me? What do people view me as? Am I this guy? Then that just snowballs into this crazy thing. Then not playing. And then, so it's just sports in general. I think and it's not just sports. It could be anything. It could be music. It could be, arts. It could be when you put that pressure on yourself to perform when you get to a certain level, and then things don't go the way they always had been, when you're the guy in junior, you show up in college and all of a sudden you're nobody again, and you have to adjust to that and be away from home and having to deal with not playing and deal with all these different things that come with being a student, never mind a college athlete. that's where it definitely started. 100%. I can almost remember the moment it started. I can remember, and it sounds crazy to remember this, but like I remember working so hard to be in the lineup, not making the lineup, and then just that moment of utter devastation of just feeling helpless. Like, like what more can I do? Like what more can be done to get somewhere? And then that wasn't necessarily the only issue, but that's the domino that knocked over 15 other things that I was dealing with that I didn't even know I was dealing with. And then there we are. But, I'm sure you guys can relate. It's when you work hard for something and you feel you deserve something and you don't get it. And then you especially in sports, it can wear on you a lot. And I think that's a huge thing that college athletes definitely go through on a consistent basis. And I don't know if we didn't talk about it in school. We didn't have a counselor, or we didn't talk about it as like a group, but it definitely goes on. I mean, without saying, it 100% is, but there's not enough, in my opinion, of people speaking about it within the team, never mind a staff member or a faculty member being simply responsible for that kind of role. But, and again, I'm sure you guys can relate.
Yeah. How would you speak about it though? Cause I agree with you 100%. I think there's so much vagueness. I think there's so much, you keep bringing up the rug, right? And it's like one, especially as athletes, but for however you identify, right? If you identify as an academic, if you identify as a person of the arts, if you identify as, whatever it is, and, whatever else is going on in your life, you're like, I'm going to put it in my back pocket. I'm going to focus on, for us, it was hockey, right? Mm-hmm. And one thing doesn't go well in hockey, or, you see a lot with, mental health, it's an injury, right? And it's, you get put back, and then all of a sudden, you're everything else, the rug gets pulled out. There is no more, there's nothing covering those issues anymore. And so, how would a locker room, how would a group of friends, how would a family, how would any group of people alleviate pressure or create spaces of openness? And you could speak to your situation, and I think this is a great time to go sort of into your support staff and your ability to talk about your feelings and just everything that was going on in your life with the people that obviously mean a lot to you.
Totally. And you know what, now that you mentioned that, like, wouldn't it be cool if every team, whether it was identified by the captain or by the coach, ideally the captain, of like, this is their role on the team. You don't wear it on your jersey. You don't have an A or a C, but like you hold a weekly meeting just asking the team, like what everyone's good. Everyone just, and that might be a tough conversation to have in a dressing room. As we know, maybe someone might not put their hand up and say, you know what, guys, I'm going through this. Maybe they will though. Like how that would be, just to have that kind of a platform where you could handle it internally would be so special. And, I had that relationship with a couple guys on my team. And I think, and within that struggle in school, I remember coming home for Thanksgiving, and like, as you guys know, you can either leave Friday, or I left Thursday night. I got home at 2 a.m. And I think I booked my first ever real sit down session with someone like maybe 24 hours later, because I said, if I'm going to go back there, if I'm really going to go through this and put myself through this, let's have some tools in the toolbox before I go back. Maybe something, if it's anything, or someone to tell me that I'm not crazy was the main thing of why I wanted to go. And to this day, that person is someone I still use as a resource. And, and I think that, back to your question and back to your main point, I think bringing the familiarity of this conversation to a weekly thing within each team would be so special. I think that if you had somebody, and make it the captain. Now that you talk about it, make it the captain, and the captain would be responsible to, to open the floor up to anybody that wants to talk. And then you close the meeting by saying, if anyone here wants to go for a coffee or talk to me in one-on-one, like this should be a captain's role. Like I definitely believe that, if one guy shows up to camp out of shape, it's the captain's responsibility to identify that to the player that, hey, pick it up. You see someone struggling in the room, everybody should be responsible, sure, but the captain should be told, at the beginning of the season, like, you see someone going through it, it's your job. It's your responsibility here to like get the team on board and identify this, and that was never a thing. I don't think it's a thing ever in sports, the whole concept of suck it up or, toughen up. It's a real thing. No one really wants to talk about it. But if the leader or, the guy that everyone's looking up to, I loved my captains. I respected them more than anything. And, not that I was wearing a sign that said, help me, but it could, if they pulled me aside and we talked about something one-on-one, wow, and I think that could be a really cool a really cool step for collegiate programs. And, whether it starts at Hobart and Oswego, making that kind of identification known that that's a real thing. I think it could be huge.
Definitely. And I think kind of what goes with that is that, it's much easier to sympathize, I think, with somebody who's going through their own mental health challenges, perhaps when you've gone through some of your own and you can level with them, see where they're coming from. But I really think, having individuals like yourself on here and just opening up the floor and having discussions, hopefully people across North America or the world really will see the value without having necessarily gone through their own challenges and be like, you know what, it's okay to, be a shoulder for somebody, to reach out, ask them how they're doing, like to not shy away and to not be nervous to ask those questions. You know what I mean? Because sometimes they're not easy conversations to have, right?
No, not at all.
So I think that's a good point. And the next thing I kind of want to talk about here, it's a bit of a two-part question.
Sure.
So obviously you talked a little bit about some form of therapy or counseling. So I'd like if you could kind of speak to that a little bit and how that's become a part of your process. But at the same time too, you mentioned earlier that you've gone through this period of self-reflecting on your past and looking back. Are there any specific, maybe crutches or habits that you fell into that you could see now that you thought maybe at the time were, helping your situation, but then looking back now, it's like, okay, that was a quick fix, like short-term kind of solution to my problems. And it wasn't getting to the root of where my issues were.
No doubt. And I think, counseling and therapy and speaking to someone, specifically someone that isn't in your immediate circle, I think having those people is essential. Your best friend, your siblings, your parents, they're key. Having someone completely impartial to you as, the individual and just kind of understanding and listening to you, like exactly what you're going through, paramount. If the biggest tool, because you do open up. I'm a pretty open guy, if you can't tell. I have nothing to shout, nothing to hide. But at the same time, when there is something, maybe it's a tone that might change, something you might hold back without even realizing. But when you're in that room or you're on that Zoom call or phone call like it is right now in most cases, you can just open up, completely unleash, ask far-fetched questions, ask things like, the main thing that I really found in therapy was I asked questions that I didn't want to ask my parents and friends, things that I thought would scare them. Because at the end of the day, I didn't want to be a burden on the people that I loved the most when all they wanted to do was help me. Yeah, you hear it. You hear like, man, you can call me anytime. When you're going through it on the other side, last person you want to do is make that call. You feel like you're burdening people. So when you're going through therapy, sure they're going to care. They care. I'm not saying she doesn't care. He or she doesn't care, but they're not going to be like scared for your, not scared. They're not going to ruin their whole day. You're not going to ruin their appetite. You're not going to ruin their sleep schedule because this is their profession. You tell your mom or your dad something that belongs in the therapist's head first, it could, my biggest fear was ruining their mental side of it because of what I was going through. And that's still a struggle to this day, worried about telling friends things or opening up to your spouse or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or, whoever, because you're worried about them being scared for you. That's not good, because, that's why I stopped counseling, because I was able to bring up the points that, looking back, would have scared people big time. And I was able to be comfortable having those conversations because it was in counseling. Then to the next point would be, are there things that I look back on as crutches? Oh yeah, big time. I think I put that in my email when we were talking beforehand, and it's something that I definitely will advocate for now. I've never been a big beer guy, but I definitely turned to the crutch of cannabis harder, way more than anyone really should. I look back on that now, and I see like why I was doing that. And, the amount of times I said out loud, even, it's just weed, like that sentence, I look back on it being like, man, like you were numbing yourself, whether you knew it or not, whether you were doing it for that purpose or not. When you were done doing what you were doing, you weren't thinking, you weren't lost in your head, you weren't obsessing over what ifs, what could have beens. You were just there. And that was definitely something that, when you do your research as well, I've done the one thing on the TAD page of all the signs and symbols of someone going through something. You can check each one of those off twice for me when I was going through it, maybe even 3 times. And when you have a crutch of anything, it could be, if it's something that can physically harm you, obviously like alcohol, drugs, then there's life altering issues that can happen. However, people can have crushes with anything. It could be, one of my good friends, she, shopping literally is a thing. There's debt now, spending money, like whatever your crutch is, it's a crutch for a reason. You're not supposed to be doing it. And then back to the self-reflective thing, self-identifying that this isn't helping me anymore. This isn't making anything better. If anything, it's making it worse. I don't know if we don't have to talk about that, but like my fuse, from 0 to 1,000, that was where I realized this was because of crutches in my past. A lot of people, and that's another thing, it's not really relevant to exactly what we're talking about, but when people think about the image of depression, when people see someone with depression, it's someone, stereotypically, wearing their clothes in the shower, or they're just like sulking, or it's Eeyore on Winnie the Pooh. But it's also the loud person. It's also the person that's going out 5 nights a week, drinking a 2-6 a night, being the loud guy, having fun, because they're not only wanting to trick people and not trick other people, they want to trick themselves. And I think that's a huge, huge thing that makes this issue so much worse, is that, if you don't self-reflect, if you don't realize that the things that you are doing that you think are just like, I'm going through a tough time, I'll just do this. Like, yeah, great, but you're making it worse. You really are. And once I've identified those are issues, I think that's a huge part of my recent transition to wanting to get better, is realizing that was a huge crutch for me for many years.
No, and again, I mean, I think I didn't know you prior to tonight, but it seems like you've come a long way. And again, congratulations, good for you. I think there's a lot of people out there that are where you were 5 years ago, 7 years ago, and they're starting today. And hopefully, hearing this, it doesn't need to take that long. Mm-hmm. But even if it does, like there are people out there that are willing to listen, are willing to help. We all at TAD are here to help and here to listen. And I think what you said about, having the person, outside of the friend group, because, I think something that, as I was, going through, my mental health challenges is, I never wanted anybody to treat me differently. Right. Like I can have a conversation where I say, I'm in a funk. I don't feel well right now. Like I'm out of it. But then, if they see you at, a gathering later down at the rink, like, are they going to treat you any differently? And I think that's where like people are like need to be able to, have those conversations and move forward and leave the door open. Hey, like let's chat again. Like, let's do this again. Like, I love this conversation. Like, I want to know more about what you're going through on a daily basis, and really understand that, this isn't a definite, right? Like, this is not like you can talk about it. You can have continued conversations and come back to, hey, last week we talked about this, like, how are you feeling today? And just like going out of your way to ask somebody, how are you feeling today? Like it's mind blowing how successful that could be for somebody that's actually going through something.
Exactly. Like, couldn't say it any better, honestly.
So, but we are going to need to get you back on, because we're bumping up against the 30 minutes here. One way that we'd love to end is a couple questions. I'll ask the first one, but for yourself, how would you talk to somebody or ask somebody about their mental or physical well-being?
How would I ask them? I think, and again, it's all very personalized, so I hope I don't ramble and give too much of a personal opinion on this, but like, when someone's fishing, kind of, you know what I mean by that? Like, I always knew when someone was kind of like fishing for me to open up, but like being open and being like, hey, I know you're going through something because I'm going through it. If you ever want to talk about it, I'm here. Just leaving the door completely open to them as a person, not being like, no, but the arm around thing I always think about, like just babying people, being like, hey, you know what? You want to talk about it? I'd love to talk about it. Make it like over a beer conversation, like, it doesn't have to be this velvet couch kind of energy. It could be like, hey, I know you're going through something. I'd love to grab a beer and talk about it. Because all of a sudden that energy to the receiver is like, oh, that didn't feel like they want to put me on the couch and hear about my shit. Oh, sorry. I hear about my stuff. It's kind of like we keep saying, making it casual, being like, I know something's up. If you ever want to grab a beer, I'd love to grab a beer. Making it casual, making it an easy conversation. That's what I do right now. I have my best friends when they're going through it. It's not like a long text. It's not like a, hey man, it's like, hey, something's up. You want to grab a beer? I'd love to chat. And if they take that, they take that. If they don't, hey, it's giving that kind of familiarity to it. Like, it's an everyday conversation. Hey, you grab groceries? No. Did you do this today? No. Do you want to grab a beer and talk about your mental health? Okay. Do you want to have dinner tomorrow night? Cool. It should be that easy of an energy kind of feel. And that's how I approach it with my personal friends. So that's how I would kind of try and treat it to someone else. And it could be hopefully not received as insensitive. But when you do make that kind of casualness to it, especially being like, hey, Nick, I've been noticing you've been a little bit different lately. If you ever want to grab a beer, I'd love to grab a beer. That energy is so different than a 15-paragraph text about all these things that you've noticed about your buddy. And then they feel like, oh my God, like I'm wearing this on my face. Like, it's, you see what I mean by that? Like, casually approaching it would be the best way for me. Sorry, yeah. I ran way too much, man. I talk too much, guys.
No, I think that's a thorough answer. I kind of, the way I view that in my head is almost like, say that whatever friend you're reaching out to, if it's a dark room, like pull back the curtains, like let the light shine in, air it out. And it doesn't have to be like this somber.
Read the room though. It's obviously you have to read your audience, of course. Yeah. If it's someone that, like a teammate of mine, I have no problem doing that. If it was, my sister or my mom or my dad or, a cousin, you have to always know the feel. But I think with buddies, with your everyday group of friends and your everyday relationships, treating that conversation like every other conversation that is, meaningful, like, hey, how are your parents doing? I care about that, but I'm not asking you like this soft, delicate way, it's like, hey, how are your parents doing? All right. How are you feeling? How are you doing? I've noticed you've been we're good. Okay, cool. That's the way that I feel we should all get to eventually. So I kind of am trying to do that right now with my group of friends. And I'm seeing a lot of, I don't want to say results, but like the communication that I receive back from that reach out is way more responsive than sending a long text, hey, you haven't talked to me in 3 days. I noticed this. I noticed that. I noticed you're putting them on trial. Why would they ever want to engage with you after that? If you kind of just identify that you see something, if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's me. And I think that's where I found the most success with it. But obviously knowing your audience, reading the room, kind of being sensitive to who you're speaking to is obviously essential. But that would be my 2 cents, my 25 cents.
Oh, absolutely. And the last question we'll ask you here, just to wrap things up. But what does overall kind of mental well-being look like to you now that you've kind of, Nick mentioned earlier that you've obviously made some great strides and some really good progress, and we've talked quite extensively kind of about this period of self-reflection. So kind of looking back, what do you think mental well-being looks like in an individual?
I think, I'm not saying people should go get a microphone and go stand on the street corner and scream about their mental health, but I definitely think the best symbol of someone that's, with good mental health is understanding that it's a process. Someone that says they're like, I'm good. That's the person that's struggling. Identifying, being able to identify that this is going to be a process and I'm doing everything I can in this moment to be my best advocate for myself. That is what you can do for yourself. But the best symbol of a mental health advocate, I think, someone that's open and accepting of everything that they go through, positive and negative. You can't have the good without the bad. Living in denial and sweeping things under the rug is no way to be. So I think being open and honest with yourself will only allow you to be a good vessel to help other people, but also allow you to grow in the right direction. So self-honesty, self-reflection, I think is the best symbols of someone that's working on their mental health. So
I think that's a great way to end it. And again, Eli, we appreciate you for coming on and being, as open as you've been. And, I think that we'd love to do this again, because I think, diving into some things that you said and, pushing a little deeper into, how we can make lasting change from, an individual's perspective who's going through something like this, or, observing somebody else go through it, or just being in a group of people that is inclusive and understanding and wanting everybody to be able to be comfortable being uncomfortable enough to share.
That's it.
So we appreciate, I think I speak for Lawson, Katie, and I, and the entire TAD team. We'd love to have you back on, and thanks for doing this with us.
100%. And again, I couldn't be more thankful for you guys to bring me on. And I think that this first conversation, hopefully one of many, I would love nothing more to come back on and talk about anything and everything, because again, familiarizing, making this a casual once a week kind of thing, checking in, that's what we should be doing with everybody. And I think that this is an incredible platform for it. What you and the team and everyone here is doing of making this an everyday conversation, not just a once a month thing or a simple share on social. It's an everyday conversation, and I think that's incredible. And I couldn't be more thankful to be included in this, guys. So thank you so much.